I think Navi, and I currently rate Navi as the second best team in the world, like the most informed team in the world. There's other teams out there who can overtake them.
No, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one. Here's why. We're back with counterpoints, and as ever, I'll do that thing where I reference our notorious personalities. You might think to yourself, since this episode, we talk about the biggest topics, it's obviously going to be a lot of like vitality glazing, angles on Navi being really good and sort of rising through the ranks. You'll think to yourself, with all that, excellence, greatness in Counter-Strike to celebrate. By the way, both teams are actually fantastic squads, playing really great brand of CS. I even enjoy both styles. I actually think most of the players fit all the roles. We're still going to find an angle for some spice, and Pimp has actually delivered. So Pimp, what possible angle, after Navi basically has done almost the impossible, they even almost beat Vitality on a map or two, what possible angle could be spicy for you, Pimp, about Navi? What's wrong?
I think the two things I'm going to mention now doesn't contradict each other,
okay.
But I think it would be to a lot of people, a wild take. I think Navi, and I currently rate Navi as the second best team in the world, like the most informed team in the world. After Vitality, obviously, I think they've done a tremendous job, becoming relevant again to the top level Counter-Strike, surpassing, the likes of Mouse, Spirit, etc., which I didn't think was going to be the case 2 months ago. I also do think Navi is a team that should make a roster change ASAP. I think Navi, and the reason for that, I think
back-to-back finals, I love it. Come on, hit me with it.
Yeah, exactly. They're in a position right now where I feel like they have closed a big portion of the gap they had to Vitality. Like we all speak about Vitality have opened up a massive gap to the rest of the teams in the world right now. A massive gap to the likes of Spirit, Mouse, Falcons for that matter, who's still soaking around in playoffs. Navi have done a tremendous job closing a big portion of their gap, in relation to Vitality. It's not like Vitality's gap to Navi is bigger now than it was 2 months ago. If anything, they're the only team in the world, maybe together with the Mongols, who's closed, in relation to themselves, their gap to Vitality. My problem is I don't see them closing it any further with the current lineup. However, I see possibilities in signing new players that could potentially help Navi to become the team that I think could be the most interesting prospect to close the gap all the way to Vitality and maybe content to be one of the best teams in the world. I think, with the foundation Navi's having right now, with Blade as a coach, he's growing on me every single time I speak to him, every single time I see him make a team like this work out, let alone the Navi roster of 2024. Where did that come from? They're not supposed to be one of the best or the best team in the world. The current Navi roster is not supposed to be the second best team in the world, yet they are. I think right now there's an opportunity in the market with how it's going for FaZe as a great example, that if I'm Navi, if I'm serious, and if I want to, obviously it's a bit of a gamble and it's probably not going to happen. I'll also state that. But, in terms of playing football manager with Navi right now, I think if they want to close that gap, if they want to be the first contender and maybe even the best team in the world, I think now is the right time to make a roster change. Obviously, when I say now, after the Cologne Major, I think regardless of how they're doing at the Cologne Major, unless they win it, I think there's a real possibility that if I'm the Navi GM, if I'm the Navi organization, I'm looking to strengthen my squad, and I think that's possible with the market and the players available right now. And then you have the foundation to be the team that can challenge Vitality to be the best in the world.
I love it. Even though I will say, I actually think the joke is I don't pick Vitality for this because it's mainly stars that will draw the eye. I actually think Navi's the team I enjoy watching play CS the most because I know they don't have the insane superstar who can save them. They have to do correct things that make sense. I always think when I'm watching the game, Blade and Lexi B just kill it, bro. They're geniuses. Like what they do with the pieces they have. This is fantastic. So one of my problems here is, right, if you're a team like, despite all the criticism I give Mouse, I actually don't blame them for sticking with the roster they have and having the results they have. If you actually look, they don't have like a Ziwu. The reason why, if you ever notice, when I talk about Spirit, I always say, like, I have to do two ways I analyse Spirit. On the one hand, for example, I don't immediately go, Magic's can't be IGL. Like, he's only done it a few months. He's actually showed some signs that were decent. I look at some of the other players, they still play their role. The problem with, if you talk about Spirit, though, is the elephant in the room is Donk. And since Donk could win this second if he had the players around him, that means that there's actually a different pressure and critique I have to put on Spirit than any other team, basically, than Vitality, who've already obviously solved it. Now, here's what's funny. Normally, I would say the same thing about Navi, right? If they're sticking with this roster, I don't know, maybe behind the scenes there's budget restrictions, or, look, we obviously know a certain country they can't ever recruit players from that used to be one of their talent pools. Look, we all have reasons as to why they haven't made the roster moves. But I do look at that squad, and I do think to myself, when I watch that particular performance they just had, which, by the way, was about as good as you could ask for. Like, I don't actually look at that and ever go, yo, I should be... That people, those rare times when you lose, where I'd be like, hey, head up, mate. You played a fucking great game. This just might be the best team that ever plays CS. And like 3 of their players were taking turns to bash on you. Like 3, for fuck's sake. The joke is the guy who carried the final isn't even the one everyone was telling you was a top 2 player in Vitality. So my problem is this though, Pimp. Even though you don't have the superstar in NAVI, so in theory, it sounds hypocritical. I should be more on the mouse train of like, hey, you're doing a great job. No, but here's why. Because like I said about Donk, I think it's on the other end of the equation. They have the we could win today and over Vitality, which is like you said, they have Blade and they have Alexi B, bro. And the reason why this kills me is I also think if you look at their team, it's funny, it's different than FaZe where people just want stars. I want a star in NAVI, but I even think it's the most obvious team to recruit the star to because there's one position left. This is the beauty of Makaza being really good now and wonderful picking his game up. There's only one position. You know, before in 2024 when we were like, if they did a roster, the whole point is you could actually find a reason to cut every single player on the team. You know, you'd be like, depends what you want. Do you want this one? Listen, there's one player I would remove tomorrow in this team. It is Imma. And the reason why, it's not even a diss to him, it's because that would be, in theory, the position that the most star talents that are currently on other teams, you know, your fucking Liquids, your Phases, your Mouses, that's literally the spot that I feel the easiest to fill. I mean, we've done this in the past. If you think of people like Elise or Twists, or it would have been Inerts, or if they got a Frozen, I think not only would these people thrive and actually give NAVI that little bit extra, which could put them over the line in a match like the one you just saw, but also I feel like most of these players would fucking love playing in this system, playing under Blade, and they would just walk right into it. Because by the way, if people don't know, Imma does play like fragging positions. I think they would walk in and NAVI would actually have that little bit of extra kick to win because, like I just said there, you're not trying to just be a really great team just in isolation. You are trying to take down the ultimate Goliath. You're taking down what might be the best team to ever play. And I always point this out. The one edge you'll always have in the Vitality versus Astralis discussion is Device at times was like comparable to the best player in the world. See, who could be the best player to ever play Counter-Strike. You got that on the best team as well. So that's the problem. If you're NAVI, I think through that final, it's hard to find any other way it goes where you ever win in that one. I mean, you lost 3-0 in this one. Sure, you had close maps, but even so, like, even if you win a map, it's just a 4-map walkover. Even if you'd have gone to 5 games, they'd have won the 5th map. There's too many strengths on Vitality. So I think to myself, the one thing they do lack, it's not even as a team they lack firepower, they just lack that superstar firepower, that one person that puts you over the top. Because actually, Makazi is getting it done so far. He's done a really good job. The problem is, though, if you do the man-for-man comparison, well, Makazi is immediately neutralised by take your pick in that final. Ziwu, Robs, Flint. It wouldn't matter. Like, they can sort of handle him. If you think like football, you've got to have as many stars as they do or as much power as they do if you want to win in the match. So I also do think if you have Blade, like this guy he's the best timeout coach I think I've ever seen, bro. Every time they take a timeout, something corrects about their team. That's when they take the course correct. If you could give him the pieces, like this is the guy that I know already is and want breaking down those Vitality demos and then coming back. Also, I'll give you one more reason people don't even think about. I actually did this on another show where they were doing the hypothetical of, you know, if we would take all the teams, how would we even build a squad that could beat Vitality? Because they were building it as, you know, it's the unbeatable team. And I said the most obvious way in the history of Counter-Strike you beat any team is actually you have to be able to get a map pool, like maybe not advantage because it's hard against Vitality. They have the Astralis thing where they go to it, but you have to get the map pool as skewed to your favour as possible. Well, here's the bomber, Pimp. Right now, NAVI is the team that plays the 3 maps you'd want because the 3 maps you need to play if you want to beat Vitality and veto correctly is you need the Anubis, you need Ancient, so they have to ban the Ancient because they've shown against teams like the Auroras of the world. They'll fuck around sometimes and play it if you don't do it. It's not they'll just have to do it. So if you need Anubis and an Ancient, and then obviously Mirage is where they've actually shown a tiny bit of weakness, right? That is Navi's map pool top end. That's where they want to play. So the problem is you've already got all the pieces basically, except, and we're not even saying get dog. We don't have to go that. You don't need Monacy. All we need is just give us one slightly better rifle. And notice I picked the guy who's sort of like up and down, and he's good, but he's never been considered a top 10, top 5 player. He's never been close to that. He's just a decent rifler. By the way, he can also have an excellent career elsewhere. He can go to many other top 10 teams. I think if you put one of these stars, a Twists, a Frozen, and a Lee, someone like that in that role, I think you've at least got a chance for it. And then we can have a cool conversation about, like, can you win? Because right now, when I watched how they played that final, look, there's a world where if, like, you know, Vitality had fucked up, maybe NAVI could have won. But also, you don't want to be relying on the other team has to fuck up or people have to play badly. You want it to be that if we both go head-to-head, a bit like this match, and play really great CS, we can win. That didn't look like it was the case in that final to me.
No, I very much agree. And I think, for a lot of people who hear that, they'll be like, what are you talking about? That just recently became maybe the second best team in the world. Why would they stop now? And you always have to look at a lineup in isolation to both their history, but as you said, also maximizing their potential. Because I think it's fair to say that if you were to rate, let's say, the top 5 as of right now, Furia, maybe they're playing at 75%, 80% of their potential, right? So do you want to explore if they can get back to 100%? Well, we've seen that they can take on Vitality, beat them, and potentially be the best team in the world. So you're more willing to see if we can make that work one more time. Mouse, different case. I'd say they're also playing at 70% at the moment. They may be in that period where they tried for long enough, and even 100% to them is not going to cut it, right? So they're also in that category of teams where you'd suggest they make some sort of change after Cologne. Falcons, are they even playing remotely close to their potential? I think we all agree they don't, but there's still, small parts within everyone who's been like, if it finally clicks, then maybe, right? But you're also starting to lose faith in that. Whereas I feel the problem for Navi, if you can allow yourself to call that a problem, I'm willing to say Navi right now, and the Navi we saw at the major, that was the first glimpse of it, but the Navi that is now resurgence here in 2026, they're probably playing at 95 or even 100% of their full potential. So right now they're sort of taking advantage of the fact that Falcons suck, Mouse suck, Spirit are figuring it out with Magic's, everyone else, are trying to figure it out and catch up. Liquid are making changes, G2 are making changes, you name it. So they are placed, as the second best team in the world, but I feel like they're playing up to their fullest potential right now. Now, when you have that foundation, as you described, with Blade, with Alexi B, with Wonderful for that matter as well, and Bit, who's been playing together for such a long time, that's also what I feel. I think we owe it to the viewer, obviously, to say that if I call for a roster change, who would that I didn't change? Now, naturally, if you can't get Monacy, if you can't get a star upper instead of Wonderful, then stick with Wonderful. I think he's recently shown that he is, close to that level. The one player you can upgrade is Imma, and as you said, that's not because Imma is a bad player by no means. He's very solid, dare I say it, but I don't think he's a difference maker. He's not a difference maker when you're talking top 4 teams. As you said, he can be in any top 10 team pretty much in the world and still be usable, still be a solid piece. I think he's also a big voice within the team when your team comes, and sort of like a budget version of NiKo, some may say, in terms of mid-round calling and helping out Alexi B. So that's also an element, but just think of Frozen in that lineup. And we heard the rumor about Frozen potentially being, explored by Navi. They also explored whether or not Sensu could potentially join, and I'm pretty sure that would have been instead of Imma. Now, Frozen was also described by Kerrigan when he first got into FaZe as the secondary voice. Like, he wanted to build him up as a player that took more responsibility, etc., etc. So not only from a fracking output, am I certain that despite there may be some roles and positions on certain maps where they don't directly switch one-to-one, I'm sure Blake can figure that out. I'm sure the players are versatile enough to figure that out without harming the entirety of the team. You get a big voice and you get a player where I'm willing to bet you that Frozen will have a higher output consistently throughout an entire year than Imma will ever get in his career, even within Navi. And we've seen kind of the proof of that. As you said, Imma is good, but he's not great. And that's kind of where the limitations is. So if you're playing at 100% already and you're not close to being the best, then I do feel sort of like we're making the case and everyone else is making the case for Mouse as well, then probably you should make a roster change. And I think Navi right now needs to capitalize on the moment where FaZe are struggling, where some of these players, even you could potentially acquire a player from Mouse. If you're Exertion, like maybe you lost faith, maybe you're like, damn, I'm not playing as I did last year. The team is not performing. I maybe feel that I'm not really getting the most out of my career right here. Maybe it's time for some fresh air. Maybe I'm ready to leave Mouse. You put Exertion instead of Imma, in those map taking positions in sort of like entry fragging. Maybe you give Makasi a little bit of a different role as well. He's shown that he's versatile. He's shown that he doesn't have to be the guy that you send in first. You could have a 1-2 punch of Makasi and Exertion as a potential, or you could go for the more defensive route, which is Frozen, where player type-wise, maybe they're a little bit more balanced in that regard. I think if you're Navi right now, you have a golden opportunity to potentially explore your own potential. So instead of saying, Navi's potential is where they're at right now, where they will be the second best team in the world, if everyone else is struggling a little bit and Vitality maintains, I'm willing to say that Navi with a Frozen, Navi with a big roster change could potentially be as good, as a full potential Furia or as a full potential Falcons, etc., etc. Whereas I still feel that, if I got to be honest, if all the top teams, and I know it's way easier said than done. Like, not all teams peak at the same moment. Not everyone is coming into Cologne playing at 100%. I have that dream every single time that we have 6 teams who are playing the best brand of Counter-Strike, and that's going to be the greatest major ever. But, results always show that the teams just, can't figure it out all at the same time. There's always a couple of teams who do it, then there's a couple of surprises, and that's it. But I do feel that if all the top teams that we have right now are playing to their fullest potential, Navi is probably ranked, 3rd, 4th, 5th in that regard. Whereas if they had Frozen instead of Emma, if they had as you said, like a little bit more star capacity, especially with McCarthy stepping up now, then the foundation for Navi to potentially be the next team to take over from Vitality when they start to drop in form, which, by the way, for people at home, it will happen eventually. We don't know whether that's going to be in a month from now, whether it's going to be in 6 months or in a year from now, but nothing lasts forever, and history repeats that over and over and over again. And you want to be the team that's in position to instantly pounce on that and take over that crown. We thought that was potentially going to be Spirit, changing the in-game leader, ramping up and getting ready for that. I think Navi is the best bet right now. So it's not as you said, it's not a critique of Navi. It's not a critique of the project. If anything, it's me, as you said as well, admiring the way they're playing, have huge admiration for Alexi B, for Blade, for the system. Arguably, to me as well, the most interesting team to watch right now because I learn something every time. I think they're getting better tournament by tournament, but I think there's even more in store for Navi if they're willing to risk a little bit. And then, again, we can look at historical context. Nobody ever called for Dupree to be cut instead of Flame C in Vitality, but I think that was a pretty good move back then, right? And having the balls to do that, having the balls to win the major, having the balls to finally peak with your lineup, and then instantly switch Dupree out, bring in a guy like Flame C because you felt that was a better player for the future. And guess what? They were fucking right about that. I think that's awesome. I love when proactive roster moves are working out instead of always being reactionary. We don't have to wait for a team to decline. We don't have to wait to see that Navi will be quote unquote just number 2, 3, or 4. I think we are in a world right now where Navi, given the market opportunities as well, I wouldn't vouch for this. I wouldn't say this if I didn't feel that there was a lot of other teams struggling at the same moment as there is right now. I think right now would be the time to pounce, set it up after Cologne, make it happen. And I think Navi could be, in my book, the team to take over from Vitality when they start to decline.
I also think the thing you said about being at like 95% is also very accurate. That's the other problem. If this was just a team where, this was like a little bit of potential or, there's still some of the players are a bit off in their game, I would be like, okay, Blade, this is your time to do your thing, mate. Get to work. Let's go some more angles on the maps. First of all, they've tried every V2. I've seen them try against all the different squads. They've clearly done all the things they can do with the players. Actually, if anything, already one thing you give him credit for is look at the way he brought McCarthy through. It did take him again about 6-7 months. Then suddenly the player picks up the level and becomes really good. So as far as I can tell, Blade is actually one of the people doing his job to the absolute utmost right now. And I agree. I think he's getting almost everything he can get out of this team. And remember, it's the framing that because you're trying to face maybe the best team ever, it's not the same as playing a normal number 1. Normally, by the way, forget even number 2. If you're even just in the top 4, you can fuck around and win events in CS in most years. Like as proven in Navi's own year in 2024, those people won events off them, etc. Like the Vitality with Spinks, that wasn't number 1. That can happen. G2, etc. Some of these teams back then, the problem is that's not what you're facing right now. Like, the entire scene's looking at this team like no one can beat them. And in fact, most teams, unlike Navi, don't even have sort of the mental frame of like it's possible. Most teams go in just knowing they've lost. Also, the other problem I have is this. If you did remove Vitality, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You'd actually have something like 2024 again. It'd be like, right, Navi's got the mega consistency in the pieces. Can they be number 1? That would be possible. With that said, though, there's also the downside of this current squad, which is they have to play at 95% to do what they're doing now to have a chance. If you also think of even some of the very recent matches, their other problem is if they have an off day, and remember, we play single elim playoffs in Counter-Strike, they can lose to a lot of teams too. Like, I'm even just writing down the teams that they played recently, the big names, and they can lose to all these teams. They could lose to Furia, they could lose to Falcons, they could lose to Mouse, they could lose to Paravision, they could lose to Spirit. Spoiler, they've almost lost to all these teams. Like, these are all like 3-game series, close map. Like, if people don't know, they could have been 2-0 by Paravision. That was real. And Paravision isn't some superstar team. So also the other angle is, now's the time to strike. Now's the time where if you made that move and it worked, you actually could, at the very least, challenge them, like take a crop for them, make them really worry about the major. Because right now, if I'm every other team out there, I made this point before, but people don't get it. Low key, if I'm every other top team not called Vitality, I'm the biggest Falcons fan in the world, but only in this sense, Pimp. I don't want Falcons to improve. They might be number 1. I want this Falcons, and here's why. My dream, if I'm any other team, is that we go to the major and we get a bracket where Vitality's on the other side and I'm on this side, and then they get Falcons, say, in the quarters, and then Falcons just has that game that every now and then they have, where Monacy and NiKo go crazy, they just have that one game where the firepower does hit, the projected on-paper level, and they could beat a Vitality. Now, if that happens, you can win the tournament if you are Mouse, Spirit, Fury, all of these guys, suddenly it becomes possible. But look what I'm waiting for here. I'm not even saying I could get lucky and win the fucking major over them. I have to have Falcons do it. And who the fuck, by the way, spoiler, no one's right now trusting Falcons to do that for me. So that can't be the win condition for the major. I've got to actually have it where I can play them and beat them. And like I said before, you can't even do it, especially if you're a squad that's got the pieces, where it's like, oh, if they play bad, though, I can win. You want to be able to win, where if they play near to their best and you play near to your best, it's just a great match. And that's like, flip a coin, let's see, let the gods decide. That isn't what we're getting right now in Counter-Strike, because obviously if Vitality does the level they do in these matches, the big matches in these playoff games, no one can beat them. No one can.
No,
it's not anyone's fault either.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm willing to say it as well, because I had this feeling even when we recorded the last podcast before the playoff right here that Navi are playing, close to the full potential. But the final at Rotterdam, the way that played out, I don't think Navi played a bad game of Counter-Strike. They just faced a team that almost regardless of how well they're going to play, they will lose. The way you described it is perfect. I don't see Navi, even hitting their peak shape, and Vitality, maybe playing their B level or C level. That's when it gets close, That's when you have a game at your hand. But if both teams are playing just near to the fullest potential, it was like it was in Rotterdam. Sure, there was a map that was competitive, but overall you sat back with the feeling that in the scope of a best of 5, that was as clean as it gets for Vitality, right? It wasn't really. You were never in doubt who were going to win. Let's put it that way, And even if they were to steal a map, then that wouldn't really change the perception of that. I feel so. I think it's an interesting prospect, and yeah, it's just for me at least. It's a combination of many things as we already described, and then even more so as we also said. It's the current landscape of Counter-Strike. I don't remember there being a time where there's so many potential, really really good teams that all at the same time are struggling massively. Like you look at your Mouse, you look at your Spirit, you look at your Falcons, the way they lost the quarterfinal, NiKo going out and actually pumping them up a little bit, applying a bit of extra pressure, giving some spice. By the way, love that. And then they still lose to Paravision, right? It's as you said, no one trusts Falcons to get the job done right now. And they should also, by the way, make a roster change, maybe even before Cologne if possible. But it's just a world where the landscape right now it's not weak. It's just a lot of teams with a lot of potential not living up to it. So if you're Navi, you don't want to be left behind that train. You don't want to go into the second portion of the season where Falcons have figured it out by making a roster change or whatnot, where Mouse all of a sudden figures it out again, where Spirit have integrated Magix as an in-game leader and Dunk figures it out or whatnot. Like, you don't want to be part of that pack again. You want to elevate yourself and you want to take another step forward instead of just staying where you are. And that's something Blade said, and I love that quote, and I don't know why Reddit didn't pick up on it. Like, it was one of the best interviews I've heard Blade ever do. But he said, like, if you're not moving, you're standing still. Like, that was sort of like the way he wanted to phrase it, that he's always looking to progress. Like, always. It doesn't matter where you're at right now. There's always a next step. There's always implementing a new map to the map pool. There's always innovating on T-side, CT side on a certain map. Like, you can always dive into Navi and see they're trying to progress in some sort of sense, whether that is with McCarthy, with the map pool, change, Anubis coming in, Train going out, all that kind of stuff. Like, he's a man that is always looking 2 or 3 steps ahead. So I'd actually trust Blade to consider this. I'm not sure they're going to do it. I'm not saying that's going to be a thing that he even likes to do. All I'm saying is that you can be sure that he's considered it. That's also why we heard the rumors about Sensu potentially going to Navi.
Maybe in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And why we heard about, as far as I'm aware, Frozen were approached, would you be interested in joining Navi, right? That's Blade thinking 1, 2, 3 steps ahead. That's not Blade saying that he doesn't trust the team he has right now. That's just him saying that, he's well aware that in 2 months from now or in 6 months from now, then maybe, firepower-wise, we need to upgrade. And then as of recently, McCarthy coming in and he's playing tremendously. It's been 2 events in a row. Let's see if he can do one more event, then we can start talking about, a new potential superstar coming into that team, and manifesting himself as that missing piece within Navi, which would make the change of Emma versus Frozen even more potent in a sense, because now we're talking about a team that is, even if Navi is playing at 80%, that'd still be the second best team in the world potentially, right? So there's always, elevating the peak of your team. There's always thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead of it, and I trust Blade if more than anyone to be like that, and I feel Navi, for the first time in a long time, is in a position to do so. Because it has been, and that's what people can't forget either, right? It has been a year where they've been struggling to find their identity again, where it's been every single tournament, you're like, maybe Navi makes the playoff, but they lose in a quarterfinal, or if they're lucky, they get to the semifinal, but they're not making it close. And then we saw the major in Budapest. Oh, if the NAVI is playing like this, then that was the first glimpse of the NAVI we're seeing right now. But it's been a year of trying to figure out how do we recreate 2024, and they couldn't really do it, for the vast majority of time. So it's still new to them to be good, which is why I think most people would be on the fence about even having this conversation. But I really do think that the timing after Cologne, depending on how it's going, obviously, I'm also willing to say, obviously, if NAVI continues to get better and they find more potential that I see at the moment and they win the major, then of course not, don't make a roster change. But I think it's something they should be considering, and I'm always willing to bet my Forsburn giant that it's not that it's there yet, but if you're Blade and if you're GMing Navi right now, if you're doing your job properly, you would have considered this already. You would have had the conversation. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Doesn't mean they're willing to push the button, but that's what it's all about, right? If you're not thinking 2, 3, 4 steps ahead, you're basically not doing your job as a GM of Navi or as a coach of Navi as Blade is.
Also, I can tell people, I know Blade a little bit. Like, I've had the privilege to talk to him privately and publicly and do content with him and DM him on Twitter, etc. And he's a sort of person who'll respond to give you a thought. And I'll tell you, he actually is very much in line with, if people know the persona of Carrigan, it's very similar, which is, actually, he's a very reasonable person. Like, he's not the guy. Like, I'm pretty sure, if you ever told Carrigan back in the day when FaZe would, like, choke all those finals with the super team, if you ever told him, like, oh, what the fuck's this, mate? You should have won. He wouldn't be like, hey, how are you going to... He'd be like, yeah, you're right, actually, we should have won that. Yeah, actually, when I look at it, I know we failed and we should have picked this map instead, and actually this guy's a star player but he didn't play. He would be very, especially off camera, he'd be very, very reasonable. I can tell you Blade is the same way. Like, if we could pull Blade into this call but then turn the cameras off, he would pretty much agree with everything you've said, Pimp. It's why, as you say, the sort of hint, the read between the lines is, he essentially noticed both those players, both Frozen and Imma, they're almost certainly Frozen and Senzu, they're almost certainly for the Imma position. Like, he's not an idiot, he's fully aware that is a position you could upgrade. Not that he wants to get rid of Imma, but the point is, if the player is there, and notice again also, he's not trying to get anyone, he's trying to get someone he thinks would work in his style. Like, I even think, by the way, the reason he was considering Senzu is, like the rest of us, he's also looking at Mongols going, seems like their coach has a lot of say, it seems like they have a system based around, it seems like they put the player in certain positions, you're not just playing loose CS, like this guy maybe would fit our system too. Maybe if you just gave him that fucking dossier strat book and told him, turn to page 17, maybe he'd be able to do it and suddenly we'd win the tournament. So I think he is totally aware of that. Like, I think essentially Blade's in a similar position to, if anyone heard that Dastan interview, where basically Dastan just openly said, like, I'm not in a position to think about winning the trophy because of the players I have. And people took this as a diss to Falcons. I didn't. It was a very straightforward thing. He didn't say it with a smirk. He basically said, though, but if I was like Falcons were like super players, then yeah, I'd have to think about like winning everything. That was like the gist of what he said. People took that as like, oh shit, or the Falcon. No, his point was, he doesn't have like a NiKo, Monacy and a Kias. He doesn't even have a KSOK, mate. So he's looking at his squad just going, right, how do I make the best of this? And realistically, I don't have the transfer market to go get those players. I've just got to work with what I've got, or maybe get like a slight upgrade like he did with Zway, just something small, and then I'd just see what I can do. I think Blade knows that he's just that far off. That's why I actually think he's even hinted at these things. And every time Navi has a dip, you'll notice he'll always do an interview where he'll say something. There was one last year where it was something like, almost anyone could be removed. There's obviously one this year where he made some sort of a comment that was like, I still think we could win a trophy, but like it's still going to be hard. He's a really, really on the ball guy in that sense. He's not one of those people who's delusional or he's on some like American sports shit like, you got to believe you're the best and no, that's not his style at all. He really is the calculating guy who knows, and especially because, by the way, he's in all the demos. Like, he's not the guy just hoping off vibes they win. That's also another reason, by the way, if we touch a little bit on this final, why I do think this Navi just can't win unless, as I say, someone else does them the favour and beats Vitality miraculously. Because, bro, it actually is the Anubis map pick. People don't know that was Navi's map pick. And the reason why they picked Anubis is because that is one of the only... That's at the bottom of the Vitality map pool. That's supposed to be one of the ones where you think two angles to yourself. One, surely they haven't practiced as much as the others. Because at the bottom of the map pool, people almost never pick it against them anyway. And then two... It's a map we've put some effort into as well ourselves. So that's just where we can maybe create a little bit of a mismatch, right? Maybe we have a chance. That was a really close game, but if you watch it, right, on the CT side, Navi clearly had done all their homework and they were mega. They were making constant reads and pushes. Like, they had all streak arounds. They were on CT just pushing positions and fucking stopping, right? Even then, Vitality would still just do the thing where they just win a round off individual players. Like, people would just win 2vx's post plant or do not. So then you add on T side, right? Navi was making brilliant reads. They were doing it where you fake them out and then you go back to the B site, and every time you do that, there isn't 3 CTs there. In fact, sometimes you've even pulled the rotator into the middle. Even when they did that, by the way, they lost a bunch of post plants on their own T side in that scenario. And then lastly, when it got to be a really even game, I think the scoreline was like 11-10. Then also, Vitality just has that 3-man boost with Zero to get a free opening kill at the beginning. And they just had, by the way, I can tell you, I DM'd them. They had that in their back pocket. They were probably, by the way, going to save that for the next tournament or whenever they needed it, basically. But that was just there the whole time, like an actual, like some anime shit, like an ace up your sleeve, that at any moment we can just do a crazy ass gamble that we might just get a free opening kill at the beginning of a massive game with our AWPer. Like, that's also why this is another angle I want to shade into here since we're talking about Vitality. And people have already done the things that a lot of my angle, like, are they the greatest team ever? Wow, look at the trophies. Let's compare the streaks. Here's the angle I want to get into a little bit, Pimp. I'm getting really bored of this thing where fans who themselves just watch the crosshair and watch the kill feed talk like Vitality's just a Falcons that works. You know, they just go out there, people are just playing FPLCS, they're shooting everyone in the head because they're seeing Flames run in and shoot everyone. And they're going, is he better than Donk? And I'm like, what? Like, let's swap the teams, boys. Let's have a look. And then also they're going, Zimu just carries them, don't they? He wasn't even the carry in that final. Rops, he's just like a top player who wins everywhere he goes. Like, it's how they use these players, guys. And one thing that's really underrated is, this is what I have mad respect for in Vitality. They practice and study as if they didn't have these superstars, Pimp. As if they were NAVI. That's the most respectable. But it's why I get why Apex keeps bringing up this Extaz angle of, like, let's give this guy some credit. Because, on their T-sides, they are clearly studying those fucking demos, mate. They know all the positions people are going to be in. That's where the util goes. Also, Apex, right? I get that as an entry fragger. He was just that I run in and shoot you with an AK guy. This guy actually needs to get the credit of, like, Alexi and Glaive as an IGL, not just for calling. He's probably the best utility player in the world. He's having games where he does, like, 300 damage to people. Like, this is fucking insane. Like, he's essentially just getting free kills for his team. And he's the fucking IGL. And so you look at all the things they do. Like, this is why this team is unbeatable. They've got it all, mate. It's not just that they've got, because everyone's thinking when they do that hypothetical one, they're just building their own all-star team, aren't they? They're being like, right, it's fucking Space Jam. I need this player. I need Morrissey with Donk. Listen, that'd be cool, but listen, you'd still have to get this last aspect, which is that the real reason Vitality gets to be compared to Astralis, mate, is they can also compare themselves on that utility and strats angle, which is kind of the coolest part to me.
100%. And that's like if you basically digest it backwards, like you have an Apex that is obsessed with winning, right? And if you have an in-game leader who's obsessed with winning, he's also obsessed with every single detail, every single execute, every single flash that's supposed to make a pathway for Flamesy to go in and into fragging. Yes. When you have an in-game leader who's obsessed about winning to the degree that Apex is, and I don't think people truly understand. Like, people know that he's passionate. People know that he's willing to sacrifice. People know that he's very, animated when he's playing and shows a lot of emotions. I don't think people fully grasp how obsessed he is with winning. And it gets to show in the way they play. It gets to show, as you're describing, in the way they prepare. It gets to show in the paying attention to detail. And it gets to show in the way that he's been able to still motivate his team to win over and over and over. He even said it after the Austin Major, when they had that fantastic 6-month period. They win the Austin Major, they complete the streak of tournament wins, and people are like, okay, so what now? Now you have to come up with new goals, And Apex said it to us on the desk straight after the final. Like, the biggest task from now on is going to find a way to motivate the team to keep working as hard as we did to get here in this point. And that's not easy. That's very, very tough to do that. But when you have an in-game leader who's obsessed about winning in every single detail, then it naturally trickles down to the rest of the team. And I bet you the second one of those players, whether that being Flamesy, Robs, maybe even Zaivu at some point, like if they tap out of that and they stop working, if they stop preparing, if they stop caring, if they stop putting in the effort that is needed to, he would be the first to tell them that despite us being the best team in the world right now, dude, you may be the reason why we're slipping. You may be the reason why we're not going to be the best anymore. You may be the reason why Navi with Frozen is going to overtake us if you start to slack a little bit. And I think having an in-game leader like that who's obsessed, who's mega motivated, that helps them an awful lot. And I very much agree with your point. I hate it's even a conversation because, yes, like you cannot compare spirit and the paying attention to detail, the way they run their executes, the way they use utility. Like, as you said, Flamesy and Donk, they're not remotely equally skilled. Flamesy is having a fantastic year right now, and he's playing the best brand of Counter-Strike he's possibly ever played. doesn't put him in anywhere near close to arguably the greatest Counter-Strike player ever to seen Earth, right? So in that regard, it's very hard for people to conceptualize that. What I will say, though, that if you were to talk about Vitality and if we were to have the angle of, okay, so what could be the potential downfall of Vitality, I'll tell you this. If you're GMing Vitality, if you are serious about building a legacy and you're serious about having your team maybe dominate Counter-Strike for the next 2 years, or at least winning more than they're losing, or whatever that may be your goal is, your key to victory, and I'm almost willing to say it, the most important piece of that team is Apex. The second Apex stopped caring about winning, the second he stopped being obsessed, that's the second everyone else feels like, okay, we can relax a little bit. Now we can shoulders comes down, maybe we don't have to practice our nades all the time. Maybe he doesn't have to scream at me whenever I make the smallest mistakes. You see it in games even when they're winning around and he's still visibly upset about someone doing something that he didn't like, even though they're winning. I've even seen Apex be up, in a game 11-2, and he's mad raging about something that happened in the game because his like paying attention and the level to detail is so high, and the expectations of excellence is so high within the team that if he ever drops his standards and the rest of the team will, as a side consequence, let their shoulders down, I think that could be not the downfall of Vitality, but that's kind of what makes them human again. So yeah, we can talk about Saivu, being absolutely fantastic and playing as if he's the best player in the world right now, and credit for doing that after what he did in 25 and now coming into 26. Flamesy playing the best brand of Counter-Strike he's ever played. I'd still make the case that Apex is equally important to this team because he's big part of the reason as to why they're playing as they are and why they're motivated, why they're focused, and why they're still in the game. And trust me, from being part of a Counter-Strike team, I know many, many years ago, it just takes one dude to fuck it all up. It just takes one guy to come in with a shitty attitude or lose interest or start to downplay the work morale or come to an event where he's like, we don't have to prepare for this team. Let's just chill, let's go to the pool, guys. One guy who installs that kind of mentality without it being picked out, without it being stopped the second it happens, can ruin the entirety of a team. And I bet you Apex will not allow that to happen within Vitality, which to me makes him, first and foremost, a great in-game leader, a great leader as well. One thing is being an in-game leader on a server, but he's arguably the strongest leadership quality player there is on any team right now. And it makes him equally important to a guy like Flamesy, maybe even to a degree Saivu as well, because I bet you without Apex, they wouldn't be playing as they are right now. You cannot replace him with any other in-game leader and expect the same results. Nope.
No, I actually, the reason why I agree is, first of all, I've made this point before, but people always miss it because if you just watch Ziwu in the server, you're just watching what he is capable of doing, all the highlights. Apex at this point in time is almost like the unofficial Ziwu handler. Like, you've literally seen real life clips where he's turned to Ziwu and sort of been like, come on, mate, like, what are we doing? Or like fucking, or trying to hype him up to like, let's get going in this sense. Also, if everyone remembers, there was a year Ziwu played without Apex as the IGL. He used to have that guy, Alex, who was a good IGL, by the way, definitely above average. The Ziwu back then was just an extremely skilled player. It wasn't this same player. It didn't play this style of play at all. He was just a star AWP, and you set him up and he went and shot people. I actually think people don't understand what you've nailed there is, I would say, like, Apex is the heart and the ambition of this team, mate. And the ambition one's really big too, mate. Because I'm with you. I always say in their team, I made this point on my watch party when I was doing it with the Yumi. I said, one thing people will really undervalue in this team actually is they look like the ultimate vibes team, and every fan loves that idea because they all hate toxic players in matchmaking, right? So they all think the best team should always be really friendly, etc., right? And I always say that's actually there's not a very strong correlation between the best teams and being friendly. In fact, sometimes you can even have, creative tension that makes you really good because how you push each other, or I'm trying to prove you wrong by doing the thing in the game that works, and then we can have like a back and forth. If you look at this squad of players, people already know Ziwu is a pretty chill guy. Flames is literally a jokester. He's almost never getting like down in, and then Mezzy is quiet. Even Rops, by the way, who I can tell you has his own ambition, but it's a quiet ambition. He's the guy who barely talks. He's the guy who, he's working, but he's not telling everyone he is. He's not going to come in and demand things. He's just going to you leave him to play his game. That's not going to be verbalized. If you didn't have Apex, bro, and you take any other IGL, take my beloved Carrigan, who I think's the GOAT, take fucking XEB, pick anyone you want as IGL who you think's the best otherwise. They would win trophies with this roster. They wouldn't have an era. They wouldn't be the dominant team. Also, the thing you're saying, Pimp, it's actually the most underrated quality ever, because sadly, You have to, in some context in your life, have either been an elite performer or been around an elite performer, like a real all-time great, to know what you're talking about with how you keep motivating yourself. Because actually other people are motivated. This is one thing I learned from actually like having my health journey, from just being a guy who sits on a PC to working out. I can tell you, even in my esports work, I've often told this story that in the early 2000s, I was friends with some top pros, and I was friends with a pro who in the early days of Counter-Strike was really diligent. He always did his 2 to 3 hours in DM, every day before scrims. He would actually watch back the demo and look at his mistake. And he once said to me this line that I've never forgotten. He said to me, I said, how do you stay so consistent and keep driving yourself like that? And he told me, what do you mean? I'm sure it's the same with you. I'm just trying to be the best I can be. And the joke is, at the time, I was just a guy going off talent. And if I felt like interviewing this person, I did. And then if it was someone I was really into, I'd have all the questions. If it was someone I wasn't as much, I'd be struggling to get a few here and there. And what it made me realise, it was actually at the moment, I almost felt ashamed. I was like, he's wrong, actually. I actually don't do that. But it's actually, I will totally credit him. It's one of the things that made me come to the conclusion, wait, he's right. If I have talent, why don't I apply like the hard work of the guy who has no talent? Imagine if I did that. Well, spoiler, let's say 10,000 videos later, a bazillion events, gazillion talk shows, 7,000 million billion opinions. That's one of the reasons why, because I actually activated that way. I didn't just live off being funny or having the odd point or having a good memory. By the way, when I have a good memory, and I use like a system where when I'm doing a show, I write keywords down and I do things like I try to remember something you said earlier, make a note of that so I can come back. I'm supplementing the talent I already have. If people only knew how many even good teams that have won trophies, listen, I won't leak any info, but I'll tell you behind the scenes, another person who's actually more reasonable than you think, someone, believe it or not, has fallen. He'll tell you behind the scenes, yeah, this player actually, he did just lose motivation after we kept winning because we were already winning. So I'd even tell him in a practice, this is going wrong. And he'd say to me, who gives a shit? We're going to win the tournament anyway. And I'm fragging out. That's real. There's top team. There's number one teams in the world do that. There's champions do that. So when you are the ones who not only have all the things we just wax lyrical about, the tactical side, the stars, the fucking pieces fit perfectly, the ego. If you then also have someone who's keeping you on track with that crazy mentality of like, with no loss is ever acceptable, that is why you end up being the greatest. Like, I can tell you that would be the area, if I did a documentary about Astralis, that I'd be focused on. It wouldn't be they were the best of the utility. I'd love to get people like Glaive and fucking Device and Zonic and have the conversations about the times where they lost a semi and we all went, who gives a shit, that was a fluke, they'll be back next tournament. And they went back into that practice room and fucking destroyed each other and fixed every mistake and came back and played 11 out of 10 in the next match. Like, that's what really makes you the GOAT. Look, obviously, if you're shit and you have that quality, you won't be the GOAT. Tell you what, though, even if you're shit and you have that quality, you'll become way better than you were, though. You'll max your potential. Because if we were having that NAVI discussion earlier, that's also why NAVI has to change Pimp. Because Vitality sometimes look like they 100% max out their own potential, that's unfair. If they max that out, how does anyone beat them?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something like it's maybe not fit for this podcast, but naturally, as you said, my journey as well and how I operate as a person, it's something that I very much believe in, that, as you said, the way you described that, not everyone have equal amount of talent, not everyone have equal amount of opportunity, but you can always craft your own way, one way or another. I'll be bluntly honest, and you probably know that as well. When I started playing professional Counter-Strike, first and foremost, I wasn't a great talent. I was a hard worker. I've always been known as a hard worker, and I'll tell you honestly now, I have no interest in never returning as a pro player, nor could I. If I wouldn't have been a hard worker, my talent wouldn't even reach, being anywhere near close a pro player. But I worked significantly harder than everyone else to be on their level. Not necessarily better, at times, sure, but just to be on their level, I had to work like 2 times as much as they did, play 3 times as much deathmatch to stay on it, which is also why I started to decay when I stopped doing that, when I lost interest in that. So it's always been a thing that I have near as well, but it's such a tough quality to get by. I firmly believe that even from like real world scenarios, when you speak to someone who's an entrepreneur, who's building a business from the ground and up, like if you have someone who's, I'm almost willing to say, like if you're obsessed about something, if someone is obsessed about making something work and doesn't have per default a dog shit personality, I think that's the one that excludes it. You could be obsessed about something, but if you're a turd or if you're a piece of shit to be around, then odds are you'll fail regardless, because there's also social aspects, and absolutely. You need people to help you in some degree, whether it's team sports or it's building a business, yada yada yada, right? But if you have an obsession about something and you're just a decent human being, eventually you'll make something work. not necessarily sure you're going to build the biggest company in the world, or you're going to be the best player in the world, but if your base level, or if your potential is being part of the conversation, in terms of being a top 20 player, or if your potential is that, if I'm at 100%, maybe I can join, maybe I can be a pro player. If you're obsessed about that, I'm sure you can make it work regardless of your talent. I'm sure you can make it work one way or another. So the problem with that for me is that there's very few people I've met in my life where I feel that true, genuine obsession about becoming great at something, or where they care so much about something that they actually invest everything they got into it, and once you meet those people, it's such a joy to be around them. It's such a joy to pick their brains. It's so motivating. It's inspirational. And for me personally, like, Apex is a guy that inspires me to work hard. Glaive was a guy that inspired me to work hard. Kerrigan, I think he has some of the same qualities. I think he's also not as extreme, but to a degree obsessed about winning. Right now, obviously, not working out winning FaZe Clan, but if you look at his track record and his history, what teams he was playing with, what team he was willing to join, the freaking envious lineup where he was there for 6 months and he played more Counter-Strike than he's ever had, because he was obsessed about showing the world that as an in-game leader, he still had the qualities. He was well aware that he shouldn't be an envious. He shouldn't play with, was it Nifty and whoever else he got to play with in Envious, right? But he was obsessed about showing the world that, hey, I'm supposed to be in a much better team. And guess what? Kerrigan worked it out, and he's now, according to you, the GOAT in-game leader of all time, right? So when you meet those few characters in your life that is obsessed about something, you better pay attention. You better get to talk to them. You better use them as inspiration. Just like you gave a great example of a player who made you realize something, and flipped a switch in your life. It's arguably the greatest gift any human being can get. And I'll be honest, I think if I have to speak on behalf of my own, I have tendency to get obsessed about something right now. And the last 10 years, it's been Counter-Strike, it's been doing analysis work. Recently, it's been cycling as well. Like, those are my two obsessions in life right now. And my talent within cycling is nowhere near being as good as I am right now. But I'm working and busting my ass off. My potential as an analyst, you'll probably be the first to tell me to my face as well. 10 years ago, I barely spoke English. Like, I would not be able to articulate myself in a way that would be remotely good enough to be on a broadcast, let alone having done 11 or 12 majors or whatever that may have been now. But I worked on it. I tried to make my weakness not necessarily a strength, but not make my weakness something that would make me discredited from my job, right? So in that regard, it's something that is so inspirational that when you look at a guy like Apex, when you look around someone who's obsessed about something, the very least you can do is give them the credit for that. Because personally, I find that one of the hardest qualities to find out there in anyone. Like, it's so few times that I've come across a guy where I sense that obsession about something where he's not necessarily a douchebag as well, because it kind of goes hand in hand sometimes. You've seen all the stories about business owners, and directors and whatnot who may be obsessed about, building big business or earning a lot of money, but on the side, they're also a terrible human being, by many of the social parameters, and that kind of disqualifies that. But when you find a raw, genuine, good guy like Apex truly is, trust me, he's not one of those guys where there's going to be a lot of things coming out, where he's been sexually harassed someone, I promise you, like, he's from his heart a good guy, but he's also obsessed about something. If you have those two qualities in place, you're bound to do something great in your life. And right now, Apex is on track, at least in my book, to be the greatest in-game leader of all time. And it's just, with Donk as well, probably, it's just a question of time before that happens.
I've got another angle for you as well on this, which is, it's also why whenever you tell people like hard work is the key, hard work brings success, there's like a really simplistic way that some people interpret that, which means I think they get it wrong from my own experience, which is they think hard work just means you mindlessly do the same thing, a million hours a day. It's grind. They think the word is grind, right? What they don't seem to realize is, and this is something I've also applied to my own career. There was times, by the way, where I used to do a video a day, but it would be in the same style and I was just pure grinding, right? And that can only that caps out eventually. You will still do a massive quantity, but the problem there is the quality ever getting better? Like, how are you actually going to level up in that regard? So I often make this extra addition to that you have to also work hard at working hard, as in you have to figure out like what are the elements of success, like you're saying here, that I haven't nailed. Because the joke here would be, there are also some people, by the way, who were fabulously driven players. They put in all the fucking hours in the server. They were very talented players, but then, as you say, they were either like, let's say there was friction, or some of them were just outright dickheads. Like, I've known some players in both Counter-Strike and League of Legends where I even said to them, bro, I actually think you could be the GOAT. Your problem is you stupidly picked a team game. You should be playing StarCraft or chess chess or tennis, mate. In that game, there'd be no teammate. You'd just be the best. Your problem is you fuck it all up with the social aspect. Like either in the game you can't communicate. That used to actually be the case with Simple, as people know quite famously. Or, I mean, I'll give you the example. It was in Vitality, and it's why Vitality 2024 sucked. Spinks isn't even that much worse a fucking lurking rifler than Rops. I'd actually say he has slightly better mechanics. The problem was, not overall, because you notice in Mouse you haven't heard a peep, but in that specific Vitality squad, he was the dickhead. He just was, I'm sorry. Like, he was the one where he was always the sore thumb, the odd one out, he was the one causing friction, and actually that was one of the reasons why that team, I can tell you, underperformed, even though he was still one of the best players in the team. So, yeah, that aspect is real. I'll tell you how I'll apply that, and this is a topic we could go to. Notice how, here's another compliment we'll give to NAVI from the beginning of the show. Notice how we made it like, NAVI, you're not only number 2, you're the hope to beat Vitality. Bro, that's like a promotion they shouldn't even be getting with this roster. Like, if I go and look, right, logically, Pimp, if he was going to be the number 1 player of the year, the most logical team to beat Vitality is whoever his contenders are to be the number 1 player of the year. So if I go and I look at, like, Donk in Spirit, I go look at Monacy in Falcons. The real joke of those teams is that we're not having that conversation about them because we've already done the convo a million times on those ones. It's pretty much the same convo every fucking month. Secondly, they don't ever seem to show that much extra progress. So as a result, they're never doing what we said about Navi, where they haven't even maxed out the potential of their 2 lineups. That's why the joke would be probably they won't make a roster move. They're still going, and they're right. They haven't maxed out the potential. Those players don't even all play well at the same time. They fucking take turns, don't they? So I also think, I'll give you this. First of all, we can talk on that, but I've got one angle here. It's slightly edgy, but so I guess we'll bookend the show with edgy angles. Here's an edgy angle for you, because I was really thinking about this when I saw Falcons do that result you referenced earlier, which is when they were playing Paravision. NiKo did this comment where he essentially implied, like, we made them look better, not as in, like, you know, they're better than us. Like, we made them look better. Here's what's weird about this, Pimp. People think I'm an NiKo critic, because I certainly was a critic when he was against Carrigan and with Way Fares, when I think that was his ego period. After that, I actually think in a lot of the teams, he's just had choking issues, and aside from that, he seems actually like a pretty good teammate. Seems like a lot of people would like to play. He's an excellent player, obviously. But I'll tell you the angle I do wonder about with him, because first of all, I agree with you. That comment was supposed to mean 2 things. It wasn't supposed to mean Paravision sucks. It was supposed to mean we just can't play our best against them, basically, which is accurate. And then secondly, I also know what you were inferring for. It's also sort of a message to the rest of the team. It's basically saying, look, I'm the face of the team and the most experienced player, and by the way, I'm also the one liking to choke. Tell you what, let's actually put a bit of stakes on this game. Because if you think about it, right, you know people like Monacy and Kizuka fucking love NiKo. They don't want to lose and have him look like a fool and everyone do this way, Makazi, hey, lol, look at this comment, lol. I bet that in a way did fire them up. Didn't work, but I can see what he's going for. So here's the angle, Pimp, I want to get your take on. One area, this is why I said that you've got to work hard at working hard. The one area I would criticise NiKo, it isn't that he chokes. That's actually a very human thing, and I've seen a lot of great players choke, not even all the time, but the joke is like, in a major final, a lot of people would choke, mate, or play a worse game or have a map where they're off. You know, the pressure's so big in that you get in your own head. This is the one area I do question NiKo, though. He doesn't seem that curious about why he chokes or what choking is. That's where I find it weird, because as far as I've heard over the years, bro, despite the fact he had his own reputation as a party animal, NiKo, especially if you look at his game, he almost certainly always puts his hours in. This guy certainly is a grinder. Every team he's been in, he keeps his game tip-top. If he ever has 3 months he's off, just wait till the next season. You know he'll be back. You know he'll have that big game where he's excellent again. And every time he gets back to his peak, you're like, mate, this isn't that far from 5 years ago, NiKo, 7 years ago. That's why he is like an immortal figure in CS that people still have to do that. You haven't won the major anymore. No one says about device about winning majors anymore, boys. We know that fucking ship sailed. With NiKo, we all still say you should win this major, mate. It's another one if you fit. So that's the part I find weird, because if I look at people in history who did overcome that incredibly difficult psychological problem, I can tell you a lot of them it was when they made that an obsession. When they like went and they read every book that they could find about sportsmen who overcame, you know, maybe it was Djokovic or Agassi, or you know, they went and they found people who came second a lot of times, and what did they do to, like, you know, battle pressure and fight. That's the one area I wonder with NiKo. I can't know because I can't talk to him, and he's just a guy that on camera, they're not going to ask him that question. It's kind of too deep a question for a post-game interview. But that's one thing I always worry about, because I feel like, this is purely outside speculation, I feel like he does do the thing I hate about the chokers, which is the one where when you choke, you just go, didn't play my best game. You know what? I'll get him next time. But what you're not acknowledging is this didn't just happen once. It's happened a few times, and I'm sure there are warning signs. And I can tell you, there's an entire field dedicated to it. There are solutions. It's just you have to find the solution specific to you. But that's why I say I want you to be curious about it. I want that to be. If I had a genie and I could make one wish of Falcons, it wouldn't be change this player kicks. I would say I want NiKo to be as obsessed with being like mentally strong in high performance situations as he is with being an amazing rifler. And because I actually said this line in a famous open letter in 2016, brought to Simple. I said the line, you already have the talent to literally win everything, but what you have to do now is take the drive that made you develop that talent and skill level, because people know his work ethic was great, and you now have to apply it to improving how you socially communicate with your team. Because the second you do that part, the rest of it just unlocks and you'll be unbeatable. But I nailed that one. But in this case, I would just love NiKo to get on that train, mate, because I feel like if he ever fixed that, mate, it's game over for the rest of the scene.
Yeah, I definitely get why you worry, because I have the same feeling, but the thing is, as you said, it's purely speculative. Like, we don't know, for all I know, that it could also be that he acknowledges himself, but he's too proud to say it out loud.
Right.
Because I could also imagine, like, if you're NiKo and you are, according to me, like, he's still the greatest rifler in the game, historically speaking. Donk is going to overtake him, whatever, may already have, but in terms of consistency, for how long he's been around and what he has achieved, outside of the major, again, I kind of hate that narrative in a sense, because yes, he hasn't won, and maybe he's choking, yada, 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 but also it's one freaking round against Cloud9, and that entire conversation would just die out.
Yes.
Then maybe it would be, you haven't won a major since, but then it's nearly as bad, but in that regard. But I get why you are worried about it or concerned about it, or why you desire him to do that. And I think part of it, at least, and I think it comes down to a personal thing, and maybe a personality trait as well. I'm speculating, because I don't know NiKo privately at all. Never had a great relationship with him, nor a bad relationship. Just, he's a player doing his thing, and I'm a guy doing my thing. But I think the first and most important thing in something like that is acknowledging that you do maybe have an issue, right? I think Device and TSM did it back in the days, like even publicly. They were willing to say, okay, we see it now as well. Sure, if you lose a couple of semifinals or a couple of quarterfinals, you're not going to go out and say, yeah, we're choking, we can't figure it out. But eventually there was enough of a case to build up that the players maybe even started to believe it themselves, right? And the second it almost felt like the second they accepted that and they acknowledged the fact that, Device, maybe I am a bit of a choker in a scenario like this, or maybe the team is a bit of a choking unit in this, like almost from the second and the day they did that, it kind of went away, or they started maybe to work on it. Yeah. And, the rest is history. You can't really fault Device for being a choker when you look at the entirety of his career. Like, you wouldn't have won everything that he's won as well as if he was choking every single time. So I think it would be quite interesting if NiKo were willing to come on a podcast, do an interview on a more deep level, and speak about that and get a sense of whether or not he's actually doing some of the things you suggested. Because for all we know, maybe he is, secretly, like you described, Robs as well, actively working behind the scenes, sitting at home, reading books about it and trying to figure it out. But I get the same sentiment as you. I don't get the feeling that is the case. I don't see any hints in the way that he's doing interviews and the way that he's describing himself and the way he's describing some of the issues within the team. I don't really know if that's something he's trying to protect, from himself, or if it's pride, being too pride to say that out loud, that despite me being great, which you are, I have this massive flaw in my repertoire and I can't really figure it out, maybe that is what could turn it around for him. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting conversation, and I would love for him to be on a podcast with you or someone else who could dive into that, in a respectful manner, obviously, but also give him the platform to talk to us about, like, what is it he's actually working upon, from an individual perspective within Falcons. Because I think NiKo is part of the problem. He's not the problem in Falcons. I think there's a lot of different things that is not going the way they're supposed to. And again, I know he gets a lot of flack for that comment, is particularly by the community. And at this point, it's like, you just get reminded every fucking weekend, every time there's a tournament, that we don't deserve half the shit we're getting in Counter. Like, that's great. It's great that NiKo comes out and gives us some spice before the game, especially against a team like Paravision, where all they fucking do before they join a game is like, please don't expect anything from us. We're a new team. We shouldn't be winning. We shouldn't be here. It's like, maybe at this point, when you've been as good as you are for, let's say, 3 or 4 months now, some may even say the major in Budapest, Is it okay if we start to expect things from you, or you want to keep saying that please don't apply expectations to us, don't apply any pressure, not sure we can handle it? Well, you've already proven many times now that you can handle it, so maybe it's okay if we start to expect things for you. Now NiKo goes out and actually applies a bit of pressure proactively, trying to make it happen. And then I know they fail, they lose the game. NiKo had a shitter of a series as well, and that obviously doesn't help him in that regard. That's an unfortunate circumstance, but I sincerely don't hope that's going to scare him away from doing the exact same thing next time. Because I think that's what they need. They need to apply a bit of internal pressure, and they need to apply a bit of pressure in the public sentiment as well, where they, as Sonic have been doing lately, been admitting the fact that this is not good enough, and if we don't figure this out, then obviously I can't be sure if my job is still here, and obviously I have to do something drastically by now disallowing the players to play face-in and focus a bit more on the team environment and team practice and whatnot, So at least they're trying, at least they're publicly giving a sentiment that they're trying, and I guess what I hear you saying is that that's what you need from NiKo, right? You need some sort of like hint or some sort of like little bit of piece that gives you the sense that, he's actually aware of this may be an issue and he's actively working on it. Because there's nothing more frustrating than looking at a guy like NiKo, who clearly has the talent to be, a difference maker in Vitality, who is, at least in my book, still the greatest rifler the game has ever had. Up for debate, sure, but clearly there's talent enough for that. So you almost feel like you owe it to yourself to figure this out, right? What could be if you actually figured it out and stopped, quote unquote, choking in the important moment?
And I won't leak anything, but I will say I have actually known some of the people who in NiKo's past teams were the sports psychology figures, and I've been able to talk to them privately. And put it this way, I am aware he actually has worked with some of these people. He's not against it. He's not one of those. This is what is a good piece of news. He's not one of those players, and there are some, sadly, who look. Do you remember back in the day when actually TSM used to choke? There was a line that Olaf Meister said when Fnatic were on top that sounded gangster at the time, but then in the years later when Olaf Meister's game itself fell off, by the way, it didn't seem as kind of aged poorly at the time, because Fnatic were the ultimate clutch masters, and I can tell you they didn't have any fucking sports psychology shit. He said a line of something like, "We don't need it because we don't choke," which sounded cool at the time, because they were winning. But then later on, I actually think to myself, probably aged badly, didn't it, Olaf? I bet at the end of your career, you had performance issues yourself. So I can tell you, NiKo wasn't that guy who's like, "Hey, what's this like?" He's not on some like, "Well, I'm not fucking mental. I'm not going on a cat." It's not that. He's not on some like, I mean, even Kassad's not like that, but people would think that's what Kassad's like image is, right? So I can tell you he's not against it. But my problem is this. It's why I say I want him to be curious, though, because one thing I do hate about this sports psychology thing, and people did this with Astralis, is we act like it's like, just get a sports psychologist. And what we always act like is, and this metaphor is going to work perfectly, we act like it's a mechanic, right? And you've got a problem with the car, so you take it in the mechanic, he just looks and goes, right, the problem's this thing here, I'll replace this bit, there you go, I put an oil change in, I've tightened the screw, there you go, it works. Well, the joke is, the reason why that's the perfect metaphor is because even if it was a mechanic, you are aware sometimes a mechanic will get it wrong, or he'll actually be like cynical. Sometimes you get, just like with a doctor, a second opinion. You take it to a couple of places, see what they all think, see which one you trust or what sort of aggregate opinion they have. And the point here is maybe that mechanic or doctor isn't the right doctor for you, even though they're a good doctor or mechanic. You find the guy that works for you, because again, your problem if you're NiKo, it's a very specific one, mate. Like even when people say Monacy chokes, it's not in the same way though, Like I've always said with Monacy, it feels a bit more like, it sometimes happens, sometimes it doesn't though. I mean, I had those second season last year where he was just fucking win the MVP when they would lose. The problem with NiKo is it's getting too consistent that he chokes, bro. So that's all I want. I want him to actually, like I say, make that like his quest. And if at the end of it, by the way, or as you say, if he did an interview and said, I actually have done all these things, well then you know what? Then that's just the way your career was. I could find closure at that point in time. Sure. I could accept it, because I also agree with what you hinted at, by the way. Just like Device, who literally would have gone down in history as greatest choker ever in Counter-Strike, and the joke of it all is at the end of CSGO, he was the most decorated player in the history of Counter-Strike with like all the MVPs, and he had everything. NiKo could still do that at the end of his career. Within Falcons, he could still end like fucking major champion, win a grand. All these things are still possible. It's not even gone yet, mate. The train hasn't left the station on that one. It's still possible if we fix it now.
Yeah, I agree. Which is it's almost hilarious in a sense, because right, it feels like, and that's my issue with Falcons, if we scope out of the NiKo conversation just a little bit, him potentially choking, him having a bad performance against Paravision. Like the biggest problem they've had is that Kiyusuke was a group stage warrior, couldn't perform in the playoff. Now all of a sudden you go into the playoff versus Paravision, guess who's playing exceptionally well? That's Kiyusuke, and you still lose. So that's kind of like what I said 2 episodes ago that we did. I think it almost feels like Falcons right now are finding new ways to lose every single time, which is the complete opposite of Vitality, where every single time they can almost find a new way to win. Like, it doesn't matter if it's Rob's having a banger grand final, now all of a sudden Flamesy is the main carry for the team together with Cyber. Like, they have so many different avenues of finding ways to win in games, in certain maps, in certain positions. You described it against Navi on Anubis, but, you know, even from a macro perspective, you know, when you walk into a tournament, they can lose a game or two. They'll find a way to win, and you feel comfortable about that. Whereas it almost feels at this point for me, Falcons will find a way to lose, and they can find a new way to lose every single tournament. So if you're Sonic, you're like, oh fuck, we fixed the Q super problem. He's playing well in the playoff. Well, NiKo, what the hell are you doing? Posting a 0.69 rating against Paravision 2 days after you called them out saying they're not as good as they're supposed to. Like why is this an issue all of a sudden, right? So I get the frustrations being Sonic first and foremost, being Falcons, but even from a fan perspective, like, what the fuck is the problem with that team? Like, Kyusuke played well, Monacy had a decent show, and now NiKo was, you know, not the sole reason why they lost. I'm sure you could find other reasons as well. But when you're NiKo and your output is a 0.69 rating against Paravision, who, by the way, is a team, you know, made of team players and not individual star makers, then why is that an issue all of a sudden? Like, Sonic must be thinking, like, where did that come from, you know? And I guess that's the best way of describing, you know, why Falcons is where they're at right now and why Vitality is where they're at right now. Different ways of winning all the time, that's a great problem to have. Different ways of losing every single time must be the most frustrating thing that can happen to a team.